First Bank.
Well, here we are, Lagos. It is gone past 7:30 for a feel good Friday. Well, we'll find out if it is a feel good Friday once we get into the stories. And joining Kaide Baker and myself, Shakra Martins, in the studio, we have got Mr. Tunde Okufi. Good morning.
Morning, Chopper. Morning, Kari.
Hey Tunde, good morning. Morning, Lagos. Don't forget you can be part of our conversation as always. Jump in and use the hashtag for Twitter. It's hashtag freshlyfresh981. Also, please send your WhatsApp messages to 0809 444 0981. And finally, we're streaming live on YouTube. It's youtube.com/smooth981 FM Lagos.
All right, so the stories, let's get into them. From the Guardian newspaper, this very first story up on the dock, and do remember you get to talk about this as well. Federal government's economic policies are working, Buhari insists. Now, the president was in Sokoto State yesterday, inaugurating the new 3 million metric tons per annum BUA cement line 4 factory, and he took a trip down memory lane to 1985 when, as the head of state, he was at that very same location to commission the second line of the facility. So he talked about how almost 37 years later, being able to commission the fourth line is a very special day for him, and points to the fact that, the federal government's economic policies are working. He also talked about visiting other states, Ogun and Kaduna states, where he saw many private sector investments in action. Today, your thoughts?
I wouldn't think that a matter of economic policies, yeah, and the effect that they have. I don't think it should be up for much of a debate because people should either feel it or not feel it, right? And by and large, should be able to. Bottom line, it's not a matter of high science.
Mm.
If we're heading in terms of the impact and the cascading down to the people, it should be evident. But however, the president, this is the president's opinion around his policies. I think we touched on this a number of or a few times. Some of like the economic policies of this government, especially in recent times since coming out of recession, have been under two main umbrellas.
Mm.
One is the economic stabilization um, initiative, and the other is the economic recovery one. Stabilization, they've done well enough, sort of pulled us out of recession. Things and are not sliding, continually sliding down, but we're not at pre-pandemic
Now, what
levels.
indices would you use to say not continually sliding down?
Well, the typical ones now, like the GDP, economic output, all of those growth rates, all of those
Mm.
typical indices. Um, we're not going. So technically, I mean, it's not we're not having back-to-back two consecutive quarters of contraction.
Mm-hmm.
But at what level are we? What base are you looking at? So we're not yet back to pre-pandemic levels, which is where I then say the economic recovery plan hasn't quite delivered on its own objectives. Now, but he's saying all the right things. So this makes me begin to wonder: is the president beginning to think of um, posterity, or because elections are coming around, he's not up, or at least ideally shouldn't be up on the ballot
Mm.
box, but he might essentially seems when you consider everything that's going on, you look at the recent interviews, having not spoken to us for the longest time,
Wow.
not doing interviews, not explaining anything.
Hmm.
Suddenly there are a raft of interviews being lined up, and he's making public appearances. He's making speeches like this. Um, is it that he's thinking of posterity now, or because elections are around the corner, he's pitching and building a story of continuity, right? Because clearly he would want the next person to be someone from his camp or at least within his party. So, these are party duties. Let us continue along the economic recovery plan of this ABC government because we have a handle on what it is that we want to do. But ultimately, let the people decide. Like I said, these things are not things in the air. It's when anyone can say whatever they want. The president can say his policies are working, his perspective, but then the people can't and then decide, how it
In
is
a
impacting them.
democracy, is it about what the government says or what the people who elected said government
Yeah,
say?
well, it should be what people say, but people then need to stay vigilant and alert and decide whether, you know, um, it, you know, it's whether it's working for them, or the policies are delivering or not. There will always be a margin of debate, but then it's not high science. Yeah, it, I think it's better. What are the indices? I mean, I'll keep going back to that question that led to the president asking us all to return to the farm. You know, indices before you came in were this and that. All those indices are trending down. What's the response?
All right, thank you so much for that, Tunde. Let's get back into our next story. So this one's from the Vanguard newspaper. It's a bit of a worrying story. It says food shortage looms in Taraba as kidnappers target traders. And well, some of the story was in the news last week, but to give a background to it, St. John Catholic College, Mutumbiu, was in the news earlier this week following the explosion that rocked parts of the school premises. Natives of this area, which is a commercial hub for buyers and sellers of agricultural produce, in that area, basically are talking about how there's so much confusion and what can eventually, essentially, lead to full-on chaos, because of the level of kidnapping that's going on in that area. What are your thoughts about this?
Before we went on, I heard, yeah, I heard your comment below your breath saying that some parts of the country really do need prayers and intervention. But it's the reality, and many of us in the cities and cosmopolitan areas of the nation don't. It's like there are two Nigerias in essence, and we don't realize and not see the day to day. The same way they say, oh, describe the city of Lagos, for instance. Of course, I'm talking about
It's probably in everything.
the bustle, yellow buses, that has its essence, and that, trying to get back. Some people's everyday essence is trying to stay alive, and avoid banditry, avoid kidnap for themselves and their family, So they're almost like two Nigerias in that sense. And it's unfortunate that this has, for certain parts of the country, become a very Nigerian story.
Okay.
Right? Insecurity, now this was speaking to how it impacts food shortage, but insecurity has been impacting food shortage for no less than a decade.
Yes.
Right? Especially, if you look at all of the middle belt, which is we described as a food basket.
Yes.
Clashes between herders and farmers, displacement of people who produce the food, banditry, all of those knock-on effects, right? So where there's instability, naturally there will be food shortage. So it's unfortunate. The story is focused on Taraba, but again, it's like a Rolodex. It's Taraba today. It's Bauchi tomorrow. It's somewhere else.
Tomorrow.
It's back to Taraba the day after. It just depends on where the focus. So the spotlight is on this because of, there was a bit of news. There was a failed kidnapping attempt of the owner of a fuel station, right? So that puts some spotlights on issues, but these are the common themes.
So we know that there's
everyday issues that are being underreported.
Yeah, but what can we do? Because I always say this. You talked about how inflation has really gone up in the last decade, right? And we know that some people, the president, for example, is from that part of the country. So in essence, what can be done essentially? We've talked about how the military is stretched thin. We've talked about how other things can be done, but really, in your opinion, what can be done?
There's no quick fix. The consequence of what we're living in now is decades and decades in the making.
Now hold on,
Right.
when you say
So
decades and decades in the making, because for a long time people have been beating the gong of food shortage and food insecurity, and it's coming, there's going to be an explosion, but the years have ticked on by, and we haven't, we've seen things, but it's not been as dire
it is,
to the point where there's no food.
Is it? Are we waiting for when there's absolutely no?
I'm
food?
just no. I'm
there's
just
some people don't
wondering.
have
So
food,
what I'm wondering is this like, are we frogs in a boiling pot, or
Yeah,
are we going to see some sort of implosion really
I
soon?
think we are frogs in a boiling pot, and we're just adjusting. We keep adjusting. Last year, food inflation trended over 20%.
Oh yeah.
That is a disaster by any measure, right? We're not food sufficient. We import most of our basic grains and things that we need. Really, what more do you want? Is it until we have North Korea level starvation happening, or some are we there are pictures of like the the Somali kids with flies perching on their lips because they haven't eaten, and suffering from kwashiorkor. I bet you that there are parts of the country that are undergoing those kind of issues anyway. But there is a crisis. It is present. It's not that it's even coming.
So
But
it's
like you
not
said,
something that can be solved immediately.
it's a slow boiling frog. We just keep adjusting and
Well,
adjusting.
what say you? Make sure you send your WhatsApp messages into 0809 440 We are streaming live up on Twitter. Um, what am I saying? We are streaming live up on youtube.com/smooth
I was wondering.
981 FM Lagos. I'm just having a morning. So make sure you leave your comments up on the live stream as well. And use the hashtag freshly pressed 981 on Twitter. I got that one right, people. I got that one right. All right, Premium Times News now. Constitution Amendment Reps Committee rejects state police. This is the House of Representatives Committee on the Review of the 1999 Constitution has rejected a bill seeking the creation of state police. Now, we had Mohammed Wudil of APC Kano speaking against the bill, calling for caution before giving governors such powers, saying that the country is in a fragile state. And I'm going to quote part of what he said. He went on to say, any governor can decide to take out whatever security measures against political opponents. He's just envisioning a future with state police, because when people talk about creation of state police, that is one of the arguments against it that crops up. So today, I'll take your thoughts on this.
Yeah, and it's not a new on that point. I guess it's really not a new argument. To be honest, the people who are my grandfathers who remember a time when there were regions and when policing was regionalized, and indeed there was abuse, right? But the truth is, are we saying there's no abuse now? There's abuse now. There's abuse now, even within the federal structure. There are not people at the federal level who can then deploy the police. So we see it all the time. It's reported, right? So there's abuse now. You can't say, "Oh, we don't want, we don't want abuse, or we don't want this group to abuse, or we trust this group of abusers over the other group."
Okay, but hold on though. Between a rock and a hard place, where the rock is the federal government and the hard place is state police, federal police versus state police. I mean, where would you fall on this?
Exactly. Now, this is my opinion. I believe policing needs to be local, right? And policing is communal.
Why?
So it needs to be close because there's studies that show that it works better when people who understand the community and the nuances of the community police the community to do a better job. And also, I think it's also more it's not just more proactive, it's more empathetic, and empathy is actually required. I mean, when there's suggestions that the police should remove force from their name, right? Because all those things are a throwback to a period, to a colonial period, and a certain type of thinking and mindset, right? There is a reason why, we like this federal, and being cynical, why under a unitary, we're coming from, to be honest, years of a unitary system under military rule. There's a reason why they wanted, or it was important for us to have a federal police, so that in a unitary system, everything's controlled at the center. Also, because you can deploy and send police anywhere, and there is a reason why when you send deployment. So take, for instance, if you want to police or you want to quell issues in one part of the country, you're not going to send people from that part of the country. You send some from another region that doesn't have any affiliation to that city and that town. So it's easier for you to act without bias, and a bit more, and in many instances, it's easier for the abusers to come through in terms of excessive force. But I think we may have shifted from your questions. Made us shift a bit.
No, because I'm going to ask now. A part of calls for state policing. I mean, we've seen in recent times in Lagos and in River States as well, just to name a couple that come to mind. This issue of governors not being able to do much when it comes to abuses of authority, except to ask for them to be redeployed.
Exactly, which is one of my points. So you describe governors as chief security officers. We like these things, or we like all these contradictions, all these, they're the chief security officers, but then they don't have any real control. They don't have police under their control. So really, what are they supposed to do? My suggestion, and I can understand, it's just a throw, because in this, the story also quotes the president saying his opposition. There's no surprise that we know his background. His background is a military background. It's a unitary system of government. That's what he ran for 18 months when he was in office. So there's no surprise. There are no surprises there. But we need to decide what we want to. And I don't think there should be any fear. You look at where policing, where the places that we look at, nowhere is perfect, right? But the places that we look at and say they kind of figured out something at least that's better than. We can't keep refusing to change. So we can we don't have to do away with federal police. Policing should be in tiers. right?
Mhm.
And then the levels of jurisdiction sort of comes down in those tiers. So you can have your federal police, you have your state police, you can then have you can have you can have more than one tier, and the lower tiers defer to the higher tiers.
Now, I know we don't have too much time to cover this story, but I want to throw something out at you, coming out from left field. But we've seen other countries, campaigning to disband the police, their
But
police
the issues are
institutions.
entirely different, and it's down
Now,
for
no, 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 no.
police
It
abuse,
goes down to the inherent institutional biases
biases.
that come in from the beginning of the police incorporation institution of the police as a force, as an institution. Now, you talked about our own police structure being harking back to colonial times.
Mhm.
I mean, so what would you say about that? If you're going to go, let's just change from federal structure to straight to state structure, would you say
I'm,
disband or not?
I'm not saying move from a federal structure to a state
You're saying
structure. I'm
adding tiers,
saying
yes.
yes, there
Adding
should be
tiers of
tiers,
police layers.
and let the policing be closer to the community, and let there be tiers. Lower tiers defer to the to the upper tiers, and then policing can potentially be better. We can't stay in one place saying it's not working, not working, but we don't want to make any changes to improve it.
All right, thank you so much for that, Tunde. This one here coming in from Bulu from our WhatsApp platform says Tunde said some people everyday essence is trying to stay alive, or gap, every single day. We're all trying not to die. Escaping avoiding diabolical traffic, dollar exchange, inflation, you name it. And Henry Manuel comes in to say the economic recovery and growth plan and Nigerian economic sustainability plan are two voluminous economic policy documents of this administration. All the threshold for success, as stated in both documents, haven't been achieved. Our politicians continue to dwell in the different reality from all of us.
And we got this one in Ola from First Tech, who says, I think community policing will be more effective and efficient, whilst whilst Emma from Ikeja says, my goodness, the morning drive to work has become so depressing. The news is always so sad.
This morning, I've said it this morning.
Ikoyi says the House of Reps members' position is archaic. This works in more developed climes, so many people still benefit from the current system. We are not building strong institutions with this mindset. The effectiveness we seek in most of these institutions lies in a decentralized system.
Let's move on to our next story. This from Punch newspaper talks about the police disobeying an Amber judge, and of course they continue to set up their checkpoints, and extortion goes on really. So to put background to this, right? The 2 days after an Anambra State High Court ordered the state government and the Commissioner of Police to remove all roadblocks in the state, the police are still operating roadblocks without any restraints. So part of the argument is that the Commissioner for Information has claimed that the state government had not yet gotten a copy of the judgment ordering the removal of all the roadblocks in the state.
Well, Cardi,
Does that make any sense?
let me save us some time. Look, when you have a situation where the people who are meant to upholding the law are complicit in breaking it, or the ones breaking it, then you have a problem.
Okay.
It's a relation. It's a hark back to the earlier story around how do we improve and make our policing way more efficient, right? It's all really, in fact, there are three stories that are a common thread here. Now, if everything wasn't a unitary system localized in the center, it's harder for these kind of inefficiencies to happen.
Okay.
It's harder for this kind of abuse to happen. It's just harder. It's harder for even the beginning of it, for you to stand on the road extorting, people. It's just generally harder, right? But when there are no affiliations to the area, when nobody can hold you to account, when you know that whatever happens, you get redeployed, there are no real consequences. Of course, this is what happens.
But in this regard, though, they're saying that
so they're doing it on an administrative thing.
yes.
Yeah,
At the same
so
time, they say that the IG is the only person that can actually give this order. So there's that, like you mentioned.
So doesn't the IG have a responsibility to obey lawful orders? And hasn't the IG himself even made this statement that there should not be roadblocks and things like
Quite a
that
few times.
repeatedly?
Quite a few times.
Okay, so if he does make that statement,
Which
and-
again speaks to
and
let
people then
policing,
don't
let
do
there be
this.
tiers. Again, we like to control this whole big monster. Nigeria is a relatively large country, so the IG gives orders, and those orders are not followed in the far-flung parts of the country or other parts of the country.
Well,
Unitary
today,
systems, it's very hard for unitary systems to work in today's world. Like the last was someone sent that we need to decentralize a bit more.
Well, today, right now, the monster's food is only coming from a certain part of the country, it would seem. From the Punch newspaper, join police to avoid marginalization, AIG tells Southwest youth.
Mhm.
The Assistant Inspector General saying that people from the Southwest of Zone 11 Command, by the way, in Oshoko in Osun State, Muka and Gobun, urging people from Southwest to encourage their youths to join the Nigeria Police Force, saying statistics show that in the just concluded 2021 recruitment, 81,000 candidates applied, while less than 10% are from the southern part of the country.
Less than 10%. And so there's two questions that sort of bubbling around my head. Is it one of trust, right? Or is it a gating issue? I'd like to think it's less of a gating issue, where in the past to get into certain institutions, get into the military, get into the police force, there seems to be a leaning towards certain parts of the country. I think that's been normalized more or less. It's been improved on. So I'd like to lean more to the issue of trust. When there are institutions that people don't trust as much, it's harder to get that that sort of interest and that buying, right? And let's not lie, they look at it as well. The police is not like they're having it's not fantastic now. They're not having a field day.
Because remember,
It's not
this
like their
is
benefits are great.
they're looking for new recruits to
Yeah.
join the rank and file,
Yeah.
and rank and file officers,
I mean, it's not a pretty life.
even looking from outside.
Exactly. If the guy is, I mean, where are the role models within the police? When so your experience of a police officer is hassling you for 100 naira, he essentially is he not a beggar, but with a gun. And let's not use the other word for people who collect money with a gun, right? And then how do you expect people to feel like joining that? So there's an image issue, there's a trust issue, there's so many things. Again, maybe if it was more communal, right? Or there was a tier that was communal. I'm not saying disbanding federal, but if there's a tier that's communal, you probably get a lot more people from the community, get more recruitment from different regions.
And we beat the gun on that.
Ken
All right.
comes in with this one from our WhatsApp platform. He says, "Good morning. I agree that policing should be community-based. The police should see themselves as stakeholders in order to ensure families and legality in the area of public
Exactly.
life." And let's see, Austin comes in to say, "I'm not in support of state police. Look at what the federal police are doing. We're doing to other tribes. We have seen the police checking motor particulars of northerners on the road. Then what do you think will happen if the state police is created?"
We like to think of absolutes. It's not either or.
All right. Real quick, let's move on to our next story. This one talks about stakeholders seeking amendment of law to accommodate artisanal refineries. This from this day newspaper. What are your thoughts about this? We've talked about this all week long, really.
Yeah. And we just sort of spark this off. And generally, as a principle, I agree with the amendment laws to bring them in, right? Bring them in. If these guys are already, they're doing this, they're refining, they're doing it legally. They're not following standards. So view it as what it is.
Let's bring them
View
in.
what it is. It's an industry.
Okay.
When an industry, and very often, sometimes industries spring up. They spring up on their own, right? Sometimes outside on the margins of legality. This one is clearly outside on the of legality, but they have skills and capabilities. Regulate it. Do you get what I mean? Bring in standards. Say, guys, this is how we want you to operate, and then you benefit from from the taxation and other things.
But will they want to come
fighting
under
them
the
is-
government? That's another question now, because
well,
these
put it-
guys have been doing this for
Yeah.
so long.
carried it, then you lay down the structures and see how many come in. You can't keep saying, okay, would they, would then, that's postulating. Let's realize that there is a reason and there's a gap that these guys are filling,
Okay.
right? When there's demand, there will be supply, right? There's a gap they're filling. Can we harness them, put structures, and even earn income from instead of spending our very scarce resources trying to fight, the matter? Let's create a framework, bring them in, regulate the space. You would always find people who won't want to come into the realms of legality. Then you can focus on those ones. But you've reduced, you've
And
kind
then maybe
of,
more
you've
people
been more
will come
focused.
into that
yeah.
space.
If you
with,
can't beat
artisanal
them,
refineries.
Make them join you.
Hmm.
Something like that. All right, we've got messages. Edmund from Satellite Town says less than 10% of the applicants from the South are interested in joining the police. State police is the answer, but the press has not been helpful. Okay. And this one in Solomon says regarding recruitment into the police force, sadly, what the AIG said is true. If the people from the Southwest do not join, they can't be eligible for the top posts in the future. Yes, there may be issues of nepotism currently, but once you're outside of the boardroom, he puts in quotation marks, you lose your ability to influence decisions. And this message in from Yinka says Nigeria is largely under policed, and that is a fact. What's the solution? Increase headcount. How? Let's look at immigration, for example. We don't need the number of guys we have at the passport office, especially in Ikoyi, because that is how corruption starts. Move them to the police. Merge the NSCDC with the police. We can spare the customs. Even these neighborhood watch guys, absorb them too. And that is why I will never support the scrapping of SARS. Instead, reform them and retrain them. With this, we should be able to raise the numbers, says Yinka.
Well, that could work partially.
Let's go on to customs news now. From the Premium Times, reps ask CBN to suspend customs e-invoice and invite the CBN governor to discuss this, basically. They've directed the Central Bank of Nigeria to suspend the implementation of the import-export electronic invoice policy. And the CBN was directed to adopt a 90-day timeline for the implementation of fiscal measures. But Mr. Bejide, who is the chairperson of the Committee on Customs and Excise, said that it needs that policy needs a certain level of sensitization before full implementation can begin, saying that CBN has gradually deviated from its sole function of monetary policy measures to concentrating on fiscal policy measures, which is not their function.
I think I don't agree with that with his point. You understand? So I mean, without maybe going into technical, the central bank is not just a reserve bank, so it does a bit more. So I don't agree with him on the last point. But there's a link between this. There's a comment that Yinka made that ties into this when he says if you reduce the numbers, essentially we're talking about efficiency. You can only improve efficiency by modernizing, by innovating, right, and automating things. We seem to hate automation in this country, and especially automation that brings about more transparency, okay? Because that's what this issue really is about, right? It will improve the process and it will make it a lot more transparent. We don't want to improve the process because where there are inefficiencies, there's the opportunity for corruption and skimming and slicing off the top, the bottom, and the side. When a process is cumbersome, then you create the opportunity to have to say, I'm going to help you expedite or speed up the process. When things are not transparent, you can comfortably not do your job and sit on matters. We need issues like this, and especially for transparency. And this is one of those issues. That's why we struggle with it today. I mean, we have data, but one of the things we struggle with is because a lot of things is still paper-based. When in a world where most countries supply chains they're going digital, people are thinking of doing blockchain initiatives, around their supply chain. This is we're not even going that far. We're just saying stop carrying paper, make it electronic.
Real quick, because we're totally out of time. In a sentence, I'd like you to take a look at this. So Disco's face imminent collapse. They wallow in debt, and this is because maybe there's a talk about how there's so much debt from the government. There's so much restrictions amongst other things. What do you think about this?
Yeah, and all those things are in place. So there is almost like a global energy crisis, especially because of gas spiking cost of gas. But our own issues, I think, go beyond that as well. But it's probably also a factor. Government not sticking to their own
solutions.
And solutions are if you identify the problems and you think of the solutions. The government, a lot of what they complain is that the government has a part to play in this. Right, things targets around supply of gas, and at what price is important, right? I think largely the only one that's working, which is one that impacts me, is the increase in tariff. Because when they say they are struggling, I'm like, I pay a lot on power. I pay a lot, way more than I think I should pay.
Okay.
But then you look into these sort of stories, MDAs are not paying, government agencies are not paying. That's a problem. If you're serving a section of people, consuming probably a very large part of power, not paying. Come on.
All right.
On that note, we need to end the show, but make sure you go join Tunde in the conversation. Keep it going up on Twitter and other platforms. On social media, he is at Big Kuts. All right. Coming up, we have got Lagos Talks for Feel Good Friday. Stick with us right here on Smooth.
You First Bank. You first.
We're still streaming.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Dave Cripps.
Right. What happens to watch?
We're still streaming.
Oh, YouTube.